Let's get some broader analysis. Douglas Yates joins us, Professor of Political Science at the American Graduate School and Associate Professor of Anglo-American Law at the Université de Cergy-Pontoise. Douglas, as ever, pleasure to have you on France 24. Do you think that President Tinubu will succeed where his predecessor didn't?
Well, he supported his predecessor from behind the scenes, and I think it's always easier to do that than to take the front center row and be a visible target for criticism. So I think he's set himself a very hard task. He was poorly elected. The turnout was terrible. The elections are contested, but he is a truly Machiavellian character, a kingmaker. He has lots of connections. He's extremely modest in persona. I think he'll do well on the international scene, particularly with the Americans. But the real question will be, can he manage to deal with the various security crises? I think for the economy, he's probably the best man. But for security, it's not clear anyone could take care of this tourbillon, this whirlwind violence.
Because this issue about security in Nigeria, it is a manifold question, isn't it? It's not just one group, it's various things and groups within the borders. It's all manner of things happening, which raises that question about the security of the country.
That's right. And here is where Buhari, his predecessor, who had come in promising to solve these matters, didn't succeed. If you cut up Nigeria into four quarters, the new president is from Lagos, the Southwest. The Southwest is doing fine. It's got organized crime, but it's not one of the centers of violence. If you go to the Southeast, you have separatists in the oil river states involved in hijacking and oil bunkering. If you go to the Northeast, you have Boko Haram, terrorists, Islamic terrorists. And if you go to the Northwest, you have a fairly new phenomenon which are called bandits. These are pastoralists who now, under increasing drought conditions, are attacking farmers, taking hostages, and conducting crime. 200 different bandit organizations. Nigeria, with its military, has a hard time effectively dealing with these problems, which tend to have other bases besides governance.
So, business, economy, as anybody will tell you, like stability. It sounds that basically the foundations on which the new president will try to build in Nigeria are already very shaky.
Well, yeah, in a way, Bola Tinubu, since the return of democracy in Nigeria, is the man who's been attributed with Lagos's success. Lagos was a city that had been dilapidated during decades of military rule, and since then, it's become the thriving metropolis of the African continent, the fifth largest economy in Africa. What he's been able to do, perhaps with corruption, is organize large-scale infrastructure, like the new mega refinery that's being built with Dangote.
So this idea of the new refinery, I presume, is to sort of tap into, that's a very bad pun, but I think it's apt, tap into a way of trying to use oil that Nigeria produces for some kind of domestic purpose, because as I understand it, the amount of oil it produces, they can't refine enough for the population to use. So Nigeria actually has to import oil when actually it's a big producer.
This has been a terrible irony. Nigeria nationalized its oil, joined OPEC, but then just exported it. It was part of the oil curse. Dangote, the richest man in Africa, has invested billions of dollars in a mega refinery just outside of Lagos. He's got a huge transportation network with thousands of trucks, and his goal is to be not only able to supply all Nigerians with locally produced oil products, but also to export it. It would be a game changer. It would be the first time since oil was discovered in Nigeria that oil would be channeled to development. If Tinubu is able to do this, you could call his presidency a success.
So one of the present issues that Nigeria has, of course, is that it's importing oil at one price and selling it at a loss.
Right.
Creating, obviously, a real problem from the word go for the economy.
That's right. And also, much of Nigeria's oil production is stolen. It's bunkered. The estimates vary, but hundreds of millions of barrels of oil are stolen. Now, this doesn't go on without the knowledge of the local governors. It's done with the organization of local governors. Much of this pilf is done with pipelines. So it used to be you'd have people tap a pipeline and then they'd fill up a truck and drive away. Now the pipeline itself, under the surveillance of local governors, carries the fluid to the port. So Nigeria needs to clean up the corruption in order to benefit from its very large oil resources.
You paint a very vivid image of some of the problems that lay ahead, and it does seem to be level upon level upon level. Can we talk terror and those issues? Because obviously Boko Haram for many years has been very much in the news in terms of terrorizing the northeast of Nigeria. What is that situation right now? I mean, clearly they are still there. They are still a threat. You mentioned the bandits to the other side of the country too, creating a threat there too. It's not that long ago that, sort of kidnapping schoolgirls, for instance, caught the world's attention. But those threats are still there, even if they're not happening every day.
That's right. For a while, the attention had been shifted on the Niger Delta. And so much attention had been paid to the Niger Delta that the northern part of the country was left to fester. Then comes the collapse of Gaddafi, the influx of millions of small arms, and suddenly you have teenagers, fully armed, driving around a very large country in the north, taking hostages, committing crime, attacking stations.
So that's a result of what happened in Libya.
That's right.
That's a knock-on effect.
That's right. It was a knock-on effect. The presence of all of these weapons is what makes it possible for such a small number of people with almost no funding to wreak terror. And thus, Nigerian soldiers go in. But they're not effective at dealing with the underlying problems because they themselves are treated as brutal, much like we've seen in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. And so these groups present Nigeria's main security challenge in the north. Often Nigeria was under northern military rule. The campaign promise of Bola Tinubu, he said, "It's my turn." What was that in reference to? The North-South division. Muhammadu Buhari was a northerner. Tinubu's a southerner. A southerner's always going to have a hard time delivering a security message in the north because Nigeria is a country that's divided territorially, religiously, ethnically, and generationally.
Trying to hold all that together is a massive task for someone who, as you pointed out at the start of our conversation, wasn't elected with a massive turnout and the results contested.
That's right. That's right. He's managed to eke out a victory, but behind that very narrow electoral victory is extremely solid base of support. He's been a silent man behind the strings. He is one of the richest politicians in Nigeria, and he's clearly a clever strategist. I wouldn't be surprised to see him manage the development challenge. But I'm not sure anyone will be able to deal with terrorism and with banditism and with separatism in the other three quarters of Nigeria.
A rich politician, Douglas, can you put figures on that?
Well, it's difficult. The most exaggerated figures you see, for speaking of Bola Tinubu, $33 billion. And they name hotel chains, oil companies, but this is very difficult because he'll often deny that he owes things and you don't have title. A more reasonable figure that's been put out by some of kind of the watch eye groups is about $4 billion. $4 billion. At worst, he's a multi-billionaire. And at best, he's one of the owners of Nigerian economy.
Okay, so in terms of making things work with that kind of push, influence, power, it's falling away from the kind of structures you will need to create the security that Nigeria needs, because its potential is massive.
That's right.
It could go on to become not just an African powerhouse, but a world powerhouse, could it not?
Well,
in the right circumstances.
That's right. In a way, because it's not just a country that exports oil. It has a major population. It's a serious agricultural producer, and it's a serious military actor. It's a regional hegemon. It has everything you need to become the Brazil of West Africa.
Seriously, you're talking that kind of influence. It could really sort of create that kind of sense.
Yeah.
Fantastic stuff. Douglas, thank you very much indeed. Always illuminating speaking to you, sir. Always a pleasure to see you at France 24. Douglas Yates, Professor of Political Science at the American Graduate School and Associate Professor of Anglo-American Law at the Université de Cergy-Pontoise, and as we've heard, specialist on matters Africa. With that insight in Nigeria, really, really helpful. Thank you, sir, very much indeed. President Tinubu, sworn in today in Abuja. Douglas, great to see you. Thank you very much indeed. That's it for this slice of the programme. Stay with us, more news to come.